My daughter-in-law believed I was powerless after taking my 700K. She was completely wrong. It wasn't even a negotiation, not really. It was more like a quiet, suffocating erasure. The ink on the deed was barely dry, a transaction that felt more like a forfeiture than a sale. And suddenly, the house I'd lived in for 25 years, the house where my kids grew up, where I'd hosted countless Thanksgivings and Easter egg hunts, felt like a stage set I was no longer allowed to occupy. Her eyes, when she looked at me, were a strange blend of triumph and pity, like she'd just discovered a rare wilted flower she was about to sweep out. "Mom," she'd said, her voice coated in that overly sweet, saccharine tone she'd perfected for these occasions. "It's just easier this way. You know how much you hate dealing with things, paperwork, utilities, all that hassle. You'll be so much happier in your nice, new, smaller place. Less to worry about?" Less to worry about, as if my life had been a burden of tedious chores, and she, Clara, was my benevolent savior, freeing me from the drudgery. The $700,000 that had changed hands wasn't just money. It was the price of my perceived frailty, the market value of my supposed helplessness. My son Liam stood beside her, a shadow of his former self, his gaze fixed somewhere on the Persian rug that used to be a centerpiece in my living room. He offered a weak smile, a flicker of the boy I knew, but it was quickly extinguished by Clara's imperious presence. He'd always been a follower, easily swayed, his convictions as fluid as water. I'd always known that, but I never thought it would extend to this, to him standing by while his wife systematically dismantled my life, piece by painstaking piece. The nice, new, smaller place she was referring to was a sterile, one-bedroom condo on the outskirts of town, a place I'd only seen once during a brief, almost insulting walkthrough with a real estate agent Clara had selected. It had beige walls, laminate flooring, and a view of a parking lot. My former home, on the other hand, was a sprawling Victorian with a wraparound porch, a garden bursting with roses I'd painstakingly cultivated, and enough space for my grandchildren to run wild during their visits. Clara had claimed the house, and with it, the notion of family tradition, the ancestral seat, as if I were some ancient queen deposed by a younger, more ambitious usurper. It was a calculated move, one she'd likely been planning for years, a slow, insidious campaign disguised as wifely concern. Liam had just needed a little nudge, a gentle push from his loving wife, convincing him that Mom was a bit overwhelmed, that it was time for her to downsize, to simplify. And Liam, bless his impressionable heart, had bought it, or rather, he had allowed Clara to sell it to him. The humiliation wasn't in the act of selling, it was in the how. It was in the way Clara had orchestrated it, using my son as her mouthpiece, her willing accomplice. She'd framed it as a favor, a way for me to unlock capital, to have more financial freedom. "Think of all the traveling you could do, Mom," she'd gushed, her eyes sparkling with false enthusiasm. "Or those art classes you always talked about. This will give you the freedom you deserve." Freedom. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. My freedom had been traded for her financial security, for the equity she was so eager to pour into our future, their future, a future I was increasingly being edged out of. She'd presented me with a simplified contract, a family agreement, she called it, prepared by her cousin, a lawyer who specialized in, well, from what I gathered, the kind of swift, discreet maneuvers that left people like me feeling bewildered and exploited. I'd signed it, trusting Liam, trusting that this was just a logistical shift, a necessary step as I aged. I was naive. I was blind. I was a fool. The $700,000 was meant to be my nest egg, my retirement security. It was the culmination of decades of hard work, of sacrifices made, of a life lived frugally so that I could eventually enjoy some measure of comfort and independence. And Clara, with her sharp eyes and sharper mind, had seen it not as my hard-earned piece, but as an opportunity to consolidate their assets, to leverage my capital for their own ambitions. The house was a prize, a symbol of status and comfort that she craved, and I, apparently, was just the inconvenient obstacle standing in her way. She'd managed to convince Liam that selling the family home, the place that held all their childhood memories, was a necessary step towards their next chapter. And my equity? That was just the bonus, the cherry on top. It was a brilliant, brutal piece of manipulation, executed with surgical precision. The emotional fallout was immediate and profound. The whispers started subtly, almost imperceptible at first. At family gatherings, which were now held at Clara's parents' house, or, God forbid, at Liam and Clara's new smaller place, where I felt like a guest in my own life, I noticed the subtle shifts. My sisters-in-law, once warm and familiar, now offered polite nods and averted gazes. Clara's mother, a woman whose social graces were as polished as her expensive jewelry, would engage me in stilted conversation, her eyes constantly scanning the room, as if looking for something I'd carelessly misplaced. Clara, meanwhile, would be the radiant hostess, Liam by her side, the picture of a happy, upwardly mobile couple. They'd regale guests with stories of their recent renovations, their travel plans, their investments, all funded, implicitly, by the sale of my home and the transfer of my funds. It was during Thanksgiving dinner, just a few months after the sale, that the full weight of my exclusion truly hit me. I sat at the far end of the long table, a satellite in a galaxy that no longer revolved around me. Clara had seated me there, deliberately, I now realized, so I'd be out of the main flow of conversation, a silent observer at my own family's feast. Liam, caught between his wife and his mother, looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting between us. Clara, however, was in her element, her laughter ringing out, her stories captivating the room. She spoke of their new patio, their plans for a pool, their investment in a promising startup, all the while subtly referencing their increased financial standing, their newfound freedom. There were no explicit mentions of my $700,000, of course. That was the unspoken elephant in the room, the dirty secret that fueled their prosperity. But the implication hung heavy in the air, a tangible sense of my stolen security. One of Clara's sisters, a sharp-tongued woman named Brenda, made a comment that felt like a tiny, perfectly aimed dart.
"It's so wonderful how you two have managed to pull yourselves up," Brenda said, her gaze sweeping over Clara and Liam before landing on me. "Especially after Mom had to, downsize. Must have been a difficult adjustment for her, but she's so brave, always was." The emphasis on brave was laced with a subtle condescension, a thinly veiled suggestion that my bravery was simply a mask for my inability to manage my own affairs. Clara smiled sweetly, a practiced innocence on her face. "Oh, Mom is doing wonderfully," she chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. "She's just finding her new rhythm, or so happy she's finally able to relax and not worry about all the burdens of homeownership." The word burdens was a direct echo of Clara's earlier assurances, a cruel reminder that my life had been reframed as a series of inconveniences she had graciously absolved me of. I remember looking at Liam, searching for any sign of his old self, the son who would have defended me, who would have seen through Clara's machinations. But he just offered that tight, apologetic smile, a silent plea for me to just let it go, to not make waves. He was trapped, complicit in his own wife's ambition, his own legacy being built on the foundation of my diminished circumstances. The silence that followed Brenda's comment was deafening. It was the silence of complicity, the silence of a family that had chosen to accept Clara's narrative, to benefit from it, rather than question it. I felt a cold dread creep into my stomach, a realization that I had, in fact, been rendered powerless. My home, my financial security, my sense of belonging, all had been systematically stripped away, leaving me with an empty feeling, a gnawing void where my life used to be. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, I found myself standing in my old living room, now Clara's living room. The furniture was different, the artwork was new, but the ghosts of my memories lingered. I touched the smooth, cool surface of the grand piano, the one Liam used to play for me, his small fingers fumbling over the keys. Now it was merely a decorative piece, a testament to Clara's refined taste. I walked into the kitchen, the heart of our home, where I'd spent countless hours cooking, laughing, and sharing secrets with my children. It was now a sleek, modern space, all stainless steel and granite, devoid of any warmth or personal history. Clara had managed to erase not just my presence, but the very essence of what that house had meant to me. She found me there, staring out the window at the darkened garden. She didn't knock, she never did anymore. She walked in, her expensive perfume preceding her, and surveyed the scene with a proprietary air. "Everything all right, Mom?" she asked, her tone still laced with that insincere sweetness. I turned to face her, the years of suppressed anger and hurt finally coalescing into something sharp and cold. "You think you've won, don't you, Clara?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She blinked, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows arching slightly. "I don't know what you mean. We're just moving forward, like families do." "Moving forward by dismantling me?" I countered, the words tasting like bile. "By taking everything I've worked for and making it yours?" She tilted her head, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips.
It's just business, Mom. You were getting older.
It was only a matter of time before you needed to simplify. Liam and I are just helping you. We're securing your future and ours. She gestured around the room, a proud sweep of her arm. This is our future, Mom, and it's a good one, thanks in no small part to you. The casual admission, the utter lack of remorse, struck me like a physical blow. She didn't see it as betrayal. She saw it as smart financial planning. She had taken my $700,000. She had taken my home, and she genuinely believed she had made me powerless. She saw me as a relic, a fading photograph, someone to be neatly filed away. And in that moment, standing in the sterile emptiness of my former life, I knew she was wrong. Terribly, devastatingly wrong. The embers of my resentment, long banked, were starting to glow. She had underestimated me. She had mistaken my silence for weakness, my generosity for foolishness, and that was her first mistake. The air in the kitchen, still humming with the ghost of my cooking, felt heavy with her casual pronouncement, thanks in no small part to you. It wasn't a thank you. It was a pronouncement of victory, a declaration that I was merely a stepping stone. I looked at her, this woman who had charmed her way into my son's life, and then systematically dismantled my own. Her eyes, usually so quick to flit with manufactured emotion, now held a steady, almost predatory calm. She expected me to crumble, to weep, to beg. She expected me to be pathetic. But the shame, the hurt, the suffocating humiliation of the past few months had calcified into something harder, something that didn't shatter, something that observed. "Is that what you think, Clara?" I asked, my voice low, devoid of the tremble she anticipated. "That this is simply business?" She gave a dismissive little shrug, her manicured hand adjusting the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist. "What else would it be? Mom, you're not exactly a novice in the world. You've seen how things work. People invest, they leverage, they build. Liam and I are doing that. And you benefited from the sale, didn't you? You got your capital. You're not left with nothing." "No," I conceded, walking further into the room, my movements deliberate, unhurried. "I'm not left with nothing. I have my $700,000. And you have my house. And Liam has you." The emphasis on his name was subtle, a barely perceptible shift in tone. Clara's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "And that's a bad thing? For you, perhaps not. For Liam," I let the sentence hang, watching her carefully. She recovered quickly, her innate ability to mask any true emotion kicking in. "Liam is happy, Mom. He's building a life with me, a good life, a life you helped provide the foundation for." "Did I?" I picked up a crystal glass from the counter, turning it over in my hands. It was part of a set she'd insisted on buying, an ostentatious display of wealth that had always felt out of place in my home. "Or did you engineer a situation where you made it look like I did?" Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance breaking through the practice veneer. "That's a very ungrateful thing to say. We helped you. You were getting older. You couldn't possibly manage this big place forever. It was becoming a burden." "A burden that was mine to manage," I said, my voice hardening, "and one I was perfectly capable of handling. You saw an opportunity, Clara."
You saw a nest egg, a financial windfall, and you convinced my son that it was in my best interest to hand it over. And the house? You loved the house. You always did. You saw it as a symbol, didn't you, of everything you wanted to be, and you needed me out of the way. She laughed, a brittle, unconvincing sound. "Mom, you're being so dramatic. It was a transaction, a perfectly legal, above-board transaction. My cousin handled all the paperwork. Everything was done by the book. You signed everything. Liam signed everything. This isn't some elaborate conspiracy." "No," I agreed, setting the glass down with a soft click. "It wasn't a conspiracy. It was brilliant strategy. You framed it perfectly. The doting daughter-in-law, concerned about her aging mother-in-law, the supportive wife, helping her husband secure their future. And Liam was simply caught in the middle, wanting to keep the peace, wanting to please his wife." I paused, letting the implication settle. "You played on his weakness, Clara, just like you played on mine. You assumed I would simply fade away, a grateful old woman in her sterile little condo, happy to have been freed from my burdens. You assumed I was broken. Her gaze was sharp now, assessing. The pity had completely vanished, replaced by a guarded watchfulness. "And you're not?" "Oh, I was," I admitted, turning to face her fully. The kitchen, the house, the life she now occupied, it all felt like a stage, and I was finally ready to step into my role. For a while, I truly was. The confusion, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it all, it was overwhelming. I felt small, invisible, like a ghost haunting the edges of my own existence. You made me feel like I was an inconvenience, a relic. And you were right, Clara. I was broken. But people don't always stay broken. Sometimes the breaking makes them stronger. It sharpens their focus. It reveals what truly matters. I walked towards the large island in the center of the kitchen, running my hand over its cool granite surface. You focused on the money, Clara, on the $700,000, and you focused on the house. You thought those were the keys to my power, the things that defined me. But you missed something. You missed the true leverage. You missed the subtle strings you yourself were pulling. And you certainly missed the fact that I'm not just a passive recipient of your generosity. Her posture stiffened. What are you talking about? What leverage? The legal documents, I said, my voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. The ones your cousin so meticulously prepared. You were so focused on the transfer of my assets, on ensuring your financial future, that you overlooked a few interesting clauses that only become relevant under certain circumstances. Circumstances you helped create. Clara's eyes widened slightly. She took a step back, her perfect composure beginning to fray. I don't understand. What clauses? The ones pertaining to the sale of the house, I explained, enjoying the dawning confusion on her face. The family agreement, as you so charmingly called it. You made sure everything was in my name, didn't you? The new condo, all the funds from the sale, deposited into my accounts. You wanted me to have my freedom, remember? My capital. You ensured I had it, all of it, legally and in writing. And the house? Well, the house was sold to you and Liam, wasn't it? But the terms of that sale, they were rather specific.
Her face had gone pale. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking almost translucent. There was nothing specific. It was a standard sale. You got your money. Ah, but that's where you're mistaken, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. The agreement stipulated a number of things, primarily that the sale was contingent on Liam's continued financial stability and his ongoing involvement in the management of your shared assets. It also stipulated that should Liam's primary income source be compromised, or should his marital status change significantly, certain buyback clauses would be triggered, clauses that would revert ownership of the property back to the original seller, myself, at the original purchase price. Essentially, a fail-safe, designed to protect my investment if things went south for my son, a protection against the very kind of hasty, ambitious, and potentially reckless financial decisions that you, Clara, are so fond of making. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. Clara stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. She hadn't just underestimated me. She had completely missed this. Her cousin, the clever lawyer, had done his job, but he'd done it for me. He drafted a document that protected me, not her. She'd been so blinded by her desire to possess the house, to secure her financial future with my money, that she'd overlooked the fine print that bound her own ambition. That's not possible, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Liam wouldn't agree to that. I would never agree to that. But you did agree, Clara, I said softly, stepping closer to the island. Or rather, Liam agreed, because he trusted me. He trusted that I wasn't trying to trap him, that I was simply ensuring my own peace of mind. He trusted that I wasn't being taken advantage of. He signed it because he loved me. You signed it, or rather Liam signed it on your behalf as your partner, because you were so eager to get the house, to get my money, that you skimmed over the details. You assumed it was all about you getting what you wanted and me being placated. You never considered what would happen if your plans for Liam's success faltered. You never considered Liam's own inherent, albeit passive, loyalty to his mother.
She shook her head, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. This is insane. We'll fight this. My cousin he'll explain it. He can explain the contract, Clara, I said, my voice laced with a chilling amusement. He can explain every word. And those words clearly state that if Liam's primary business venture, the one you've been so vocal about investing in, the one that's apparently on the verge of collapse if the market rumors are to be believed, experiences significant financial distress, or if Liam were to suddenly find himself single and needing to divest himself of shared marital assets, the house would revert, and at the original purchase price, which I recall was significantly lower than the current market value, a price you were happy to pay, and a price I am more than happy to accept should the need arise. The blood drained from her face completely now.
The carefully constructed facade of calm confidence had shattered, revealing a raw, desperate fear. She looked like a cornered animal. The business, it's not failing. Those are just rumors, and Liam would never leave me. Rumors have a way of becoming truths, Clara, I said, my gaze unwavering, especially when fueled by genuine financial instability. And as for Liam, well, he always was a mama's boy. You should have considered that when you decided to use him as your pawn. You built your future on shaky ground, Clara. You built it on my supposed weakness and on Liam's susceptibility. And now the ground is starting to give way. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a near whisper, the words designed to burrow into her deepest anxieties. Think about it, Clara. If Liam's business goes under and he can no longer afford the mortgage payments, or if, hypothetically, Liam were to decide that being married to you, with all its associated financial risks, wasn't worth the trouble, what happens then? The house becomes mine again, and you, Clara, you'll be left with nothing but the debt you accrue trying to furnish it, and the knowledge that you gambled everything on a future that never materialized, a future you tried to steal from me. A single tear, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in months, traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of remorse. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated panic. You wouldn't, she choked out. You wouldn't do that to Liam, to your own son. I met her terrified gaze, and for the first time I felt a sense of profound calm. The rage that had simmered within me for so long had finally found its outlet. It wasn't a destructive fire anymore. It was a steady, burning ember, illuminating a clear path forward. Liam is my son, yes, I said, my voice steady and firm, and I will always look out for his best interests. Your best interests, Clara, however, are no longer my concern. You saw me as a pawn. You used me, and now the game has changed. You wanted my house? You wanted my money? You shall have them, but not in the way you intended. You will have them back, stripped of all your gaudy additions, returned to me as they were, and you will be left to explain to Liam why his wife's ambition led to their financial ruin and the loss of the very home she craved. I turned away from her, walking towards the grand French doors that led out to what used to be my garden. The moonlight cast long shadows, transforming the familiar landscape into something alien and cold. Clara stood frozen behind me, her silence a testament to the implosion of her world. I knew with absolute certainty that she would never have seen this coming. She was too arrogant, too convinced of her own cleverness. She had underestimated the quiet strength of a mother who had been wronged, a woman who had learned that sometimes the greatest power lies not in confrontation, but in patience, in observation, and in a deep, unyielding resolve. The game was far from over, but the tide had turned, and Clara, for all her calculated moves, had just made the most crucial mistake of her life. She had made me angry enough to finally fight back, and I wasn't going to stop until I had reclaimed everything she had so carelessly stolen. The phone in my pocket buzzed. A text message. It was Liam. Mom, Clara says something about the house. Is everything okay? She seems really upset.
I stared at the glowing screen, a bitter smile touching my lips. Upset? Oh, Clara was just beginning to understand what upset truly meant. I didn't reply. Not yet. There would be time for Liam. There would be time for explanations. But first, I needed to savor this moment, this quiet triumph. The first domino had fallen, and the rest were about to tumble.
The silence that followed Clara's panicked whispers felt like a physical weight in the air, pressing down on everything. Her eyes, wide and glassy, darted from me to the gleaming surfaces of the kitchen, as if the very wealth she'd coveted might absorb her sudden destitution. She opened her mouth, a wordless sound escaping, but no coherent thought followed. That was the moment. That was the precise, chilling instant when the entire edifice of her carefully constructed world began to buckle. She had played the Game of Thrones with my life, and she had severely miscalculated the Queen's strength. I walked past her, my footsteps unnervingly soft on the hardwood floor. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to rage. The truth, laid out in cold legalistic terms, was far more devastating. Her greed had been her undoing, her assumption of my weakness, her fatal flaw. She saw $700,000 and a house. I saw the meticulously crafted safety net I had woven, a net designed not to catch me, but to ensnare the one who tried to pull me down. My cousin, David, the lawyer who had handled the sale of my home to them, was brilliant. He had understood, instinctively, my quiet fear of being left adrift, my maternal instinct to protect Liam even from himself and his ambitious partners. He'd added the clauses, the subtle, insidious conditions that only a seasoned legal mind would recognize as a coiled viper in an otherwise innocuous contract. Clauses triggered by financial precarity, by marital disillusion. Clara, in her haste to claim her prize, had dismissed them as boilerplate, as legalistic fluff. She was so eager for the keys to my kingdom, she hadn't read the coronation charter. I reached the living room, the space Clara had so eagerly redecorated, stripping away the warmth of my tastes for her sleek, sterile modernism. The expensive, impersonal art, the minimalist furniture, the stark white walls, it all screamed of money, yes, but also of a profound lack of soul. It was a showroom, not a home, and soon it would be mine again, stripped bare of her influence. I paused, looking at the framed photograph on the mantelpiece, Liam and Clara, beaming on a yacht somewhere impossibly blue, a manufactured happiness, a snapshot of a life built on a foundation of sand. "It's not about Liam," I said, my voice carrying into the room, calm and steady. "Not really. It's about consequences, Clara. You thought you were so clever, so much smarter than me. You convinced Liam it was a good idea to consolidate assets, to help his aging mother move on. You saw my home, my financial security, as yours for the taking. You saw me as an obstacle to be removed. You underestimated me, terribly, and that's your first and will be your final mistake." Her shadow flickered in the doorway, a desperate, hollow silhouette. "You can't do this. This is our home. Liam and I." "Liam and you were," I corrected, turning to face her. The fear in her eyes was a palpable thing, a sour scent in the air. "That contract, Clara, was designed as a safeguard for my investment. The initial purchase price of the house was recorded." "My name is still on the deed, contingent on certain conditions being met. Conditions related to the stability of Liam's primary business interests. And you know I've been hearing things, whispers in the circles Liam used to run in, that the Innovate Futures project, his big play, is struggling, facing significant investor pullout. Is that true, Clara? Is Liam's golden goose about to lay a rotten egg?" Her jaw clenched. The carefully sculpted mask of composure was cracking, revealing the raw panic beneath. She wouldn't confirm it, of course, but her silence was louder than any confession. "And then there's the other condition," I continued, my voice dropping, laced with a chilling intimacy. "The one about marital dissolution. You see, the contract states that if the primary purchasers, Liam and you, were to separate, or if Liam were to find himself solely responsible for significant marital debts, the property would revert to the original seller, me, at the original purchase price. It's quite thorough, actually. David is a very thorough lawyer." She recoiled as if struck. He couldn't. Liam loves me." "Liam loves you," I echoed, a hollow sound, "just as he loved me. He's a good son, Clara, loyal, perhaps too loyal to a fault. He wants to please. He wants to avoid conflict. You used that. You used his desire for peace, his admiration for your drive, to push through your agenda. You made him complicit in my displacement.
Now imagine his face when he realizes that the generous deal he thought was securing his future actually put him at risk of losing everything. Imagine him facing financial ruin, and then having to face me, the woman he trusted, asking for the house back at a fraction of its worth because your ambition couldn't be contained. I walked over to the grand piano that sat silently in the corner, a relic of my own past joys, untouched by Clara's aggressive modernizing. I lifted the lid and ran a finger over the ivory keys. They felt cool, familiar. You know, I've been playing the part of the gracious, displaced mother for months. I've been the quiet victim. I've let you waltz around in my home, basking in your perceived victory. And all the while, I've been watching. I've been listening. I've been letting you believe you'd won. But winning isn't about the quick grab, Clara. It's about the long game. And I've been playing it for a very long time. She was breathing in short, shallow gasps now, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting the walls to close in. You're insane. This is a threat. I'll call my cousin. He'll tell you this contract is invalid. It's predatory. Predatory? I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Predatory was you convincing Liam to pressure me, to paint me as incapable of managing my own affairs. Predatory was you using your charm to dismantle my life. This is self-preservation. This is justice. David drew up the contract to protect me, Clara, to ensure that if your ambitious plans for financial empire building went south, I wouldn't be left high and dry. He anticipated that someone like you might disregard the consequences, might gamble with other people's stability. He built a safety net, and you, in your arrogance, walked right into it. I sat down at the piano, my fingers finding a familiar chord progression. A melancholy melody began to fill the room, the notes echoing the slow, steady build of my power.
Your cousin, the lawyer, did his job. He ensured the sale was legally sound. He ensured my interests were protected. He drafted a contract that allows for the reversion of ownership under specific and increasingly likely circumstances. Circumstances that are now entirely within my control to trigger, should Liam's financial situation become untenable, or should you two decide that the strain of this situation is too much to bear. I let the music swell, the notes filling the cavernous space. Clara stood rooted to the spot, her face a mask of dawning horror. She was finally beginning to understand. The $700,000 was gone, yes. The house was in her name, technically, but the ultimate control, the final say, rested with me. She had traded a tangible sum of money for a contingent asset, an asset that was now poised to slip through her fingers like smoke. You think I wanted this? I continued, my voice low, almost conversational, but each word dripped with ice. To be pushed out of my home? To be made to feel like a burden? No, but you made me do this, Clara. You forced my hand. You underestimated the resilience of a mother who has nothing left to lose but her dignity. And I've regained more than my dignity. I've regained my power. I stopped playing, the final chord hanging in the air, a mournful, lingering note. I rose from the bench, my gaze fixed on Clara. Her perfect hair was coming undone, a few strands falling across her ashen face. Her expensive clothes seemed to hang on her now, her posture defeated. When Liam called, asking if everything was okay because you were upset, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I didn't reply. I let him worry. I let him wonder. Because that's what you did to me, Clara. You made me worry. You made me wonder if my son still cared. And now he's going to have to wonder why his wife's ambition has cost him his home. He's going to have to answer to me and to himself about what happened here. I walked towards the front door, my movements deliberate. The expensive rug beneath my feet, the custom-made banister on the staircase, the imported marble in the foyer, all of it was a monument to the life Clara had tried to steal. And soon, it would be a monument to her spectacular downfall. You see, Clara, I said, reaching for the doorknob. The cool metal felt grounding, solid. You were so focused on the acquisition, you never considered the depreciation. You never considered the underlying value, the intrinsic worth that goes beyond market price. You saw my home as an asset to be liquidated. I see it as a legacy. And legacies, my dear, are not easily bought or sold. They are earned, and they are protected by any means necessary. I opened the door, letting in the cool night air, the distant hum of traffic a familiar soundtrack to my quiet victory.
Behind me, Clara was a statue of despair, her world collapsing around her. She had tried to break me, to silence me, to erase me, but she had only succeeded in forging me into something stronger, something more resilient. I had gone from humiliation to silence, and now to absolute control. The bank will be in touch soon, I said, my voice barely audible over the wind. They'll have received notification about Liam's financial situation and the terms of the sale. They'll advise you on the next steps, or more accurately, they'll advise you on how to vacate the premises.
I stepped out onto the porch, the vast expanse of the suburban night stretching before me. The moon, a sliver of silver, hung high in the sky. It was a cold, clear night, perfect for endings. I closed the door behind me, the soft click echoing in the sudden, profound silence. I didn't look back. There was no need. The game was over, and I had won. The relief, the sheer, unalterated relief, washed over me, not like a wave, but like a slow, steady tide, filling every empty space left by months of anguish. I had survived. I had fought back, and I had reclaimed my life, piece by excruciating piece. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was mine, and that was everything.